Hello and welcome to Author for Life, which is what I assume you all want. So because you are here at this talk or watching or listening to this talk, I'm assuming this is your ultimate goal. I'm assuming this is your end game, is to be an author for your life. So if that is your goal, then I have good news, because unlike all of the other talks that I do, I'm going to give you a 5-step process for how to do this, which you did not know that I was capable of this, but I am. You're not going to like some of them, but that should not surprise you. Okay, hopefully everybody can raise your hands, right? Is everybody capable of raising hands? If you're not, don't worry about it, but how many of you know someone with brown hair? Yep. Okay, 100%. Do you know someone named Daniel? Probably 100% or close. Do you know a brown-haired Daniel? Okay, again, we're still at almost 100%. Here are some examples if you would like some. The correct brown-haired Daniel, by the way, is Daniel Ricardo, in case you were wondering, who will be here next week. I'm so excited. Okay. Do you know a Daniel that does not have brown hair? Wait, keep your hands up. Everybody look around. So if you were to guesstimate, what is the percentage of people who know someone named Daniel who does not have brown hair? 25%-ish, right? Maybe 30, maybe 40. How many people raised their hands when we said brown-haired Daniels, though? A lot. Almost 100, probably. What if I were to tell you that the percentage of people in the world who are named Daniel who have brown hair is 70%? What if I were to tell you that it was 90%? What if I said it was 99%? Okay, it's not. Don't look it up, by the way, it's not worth knowing. But it's not 99%, but let's just say it is. Think about that for a second. Becca just said 99% of Daniels in the world have brown hair. And now tomorrow, you are adopting or having a baby, and that baby has brown hair. Are you going to name that baby Daniel? No. So is that statistic going to impact at all what you name your baby? Probably not. But I want you to think about that for a second. I just said 99% and you have a brown-haired baby. So think about the level of certainty that you feel. Would it make you assume, if I told you 99% of Daniels in the world have brown hair, if you saw a name Daniel on Facebook, would you assume that they have brown hair? Maybe, maybe not, but it's not going to make you name your baby Daniel. Okay. Some of you are like, who is this chick and why is she saying this stupid stuff? But I need you to feel the certainty that I just told you that you should name your brown-haired baby Daniel. And you all said resoundingly, by the way, as though I was an idiot for suggesting it. No, of course not, right? Think about why you said that. Why did you just say with such certainty, no, it would not affect how I name my baby? Because you have a large amount of exposure to babies. And you have a large amount of exposure to baby naming, and some of you have named multiple babies in the past, and some of you who've named multiple babies have never used the name Daniel once, even if all your babies had brown hair. So you instinctively know, because you know the difference between descriptive patterns and predictive patterns when you have enough experience with the pattern itself to know that it's okay to say no to that thing. So when Becca says, hey, I see that brown-haired baby that you have, maybe you should name it Daniel. and you say, you're an idiot. Unless, of course, you want to name your baby Daniel, please do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But think about why we apply predictive reasoning to patterns where only descriptive reasoning is being engaged. Think about that. You know not to do it when I tell you how to name your kids. But when I tell you you have to be on TikTok, or you have to do direct sales, or you have to do rapid release, or you have to write every day, what do? You immediately, most of you, not all, some of you do not do this. You have an intact skill chain for saying no to things that are not for you. But many of us do not have enough experience with those things to know that it's okay to say no to them if that is for you. If the thing is for you, it's okay to say yes. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of these practices, but you don't have enough certainty to be able to say no when you need to, because you are making brown-haired Daniel babies and you don't know it. Your level of certainty is so low and someone else's level of certainty is so high that you are willing to forego your own instincts, your own intuition, your own knowledge of yourself to do what people say you should do. And I want to know if you know why you're doing this. So some of it is certainty, absolutely. And certainty often comes from understanding of a situation in terms of I've seen enough babies named. But the real reason is that you know what the rules of baby naming are. You instinctively understand the rules of baby naming, and you know that descriptive patterns have no business making decisions for you when it comes to baby naming. Because you know what the rules are. You know, nope, it's my choice, Becca. I get to do it the way that I want. So you felt the certainty when I told you what to do, and then you didn't feel the certainty in other situations where you're wondering what it is that you should be doing. And some of you are wondering why I'm hitting this so hard. And it's specifically because I'm going to tell you some stuff in the course of the next, 37 minutes and 20 seconds that is going to be alarming to some of us. Maybe it's going to be frustrating to some of us. Maybe it's going to be completely exactly what you expected to hear from me. But some of us are going to be a little uncomfortable. And I need for you to remember that feeling of certainty that you have when you understand the rules of baby naming. Think about the game of chess. When you understand what the rules of chess are, which is checkmate is the end game. That's the rule. So that's the end goal, the end game. And when you know what the end game success looks like, it is okay if you lose your queen. It is okay if you lose your rook. It's okay if it looks like you are not winning in the moment, because you know what the end game is, and you know that that hasn't been decided yet until it's decided. And so many of us in this author career, we don't know the rules by which we are playing, and we are feeling a tremendous amount of uncertainty, especially right now, about how to make decisions in this business and about how to make sure that we have an author for life career. We want to be authors for our whole lives. Some of us have been dreaming about being authors since we were born, practically, and we want this badly. But when we see the face of the chess game that we are not currently winning, or the chess game that we haven't started yet that is confusing us, then we struggle to be able to feel the certainty that I'm going to be able to be an author for my lifetime. And I want to tell you a couple of things about me that makes me know that it is possible for you to do this. Not believe, not think, not hope, but know that it is possible for you to do that, because when you coach at volume and you see what it looks like to have many, 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 many different versions of long-term author careers, you know that it is never, ever over. It is always possible to continue playing the game. And I need you to feel my certainty about that. This was why when I was talking this morning about the future, and I said, just come to my talk this afternoon and you'll know what I mean. It is the way that we know is we see that the large-scale patterns are what they are. We call them what they are. Not small-scale patterns, not anecdata, but large-scale at-volume patterns in the industry, which is how you know what the rules are. By the way, if you've ever watched babies learn how to talk or walk, this is how we are wired to assimilate rule sets. We're wired to look at how other people are doing it and then to engage and interact and figure out what the rules are on our own, and then we practice the rules without knowing them. The problem is that some of us are practicing rules of a game that we are not playing anymore, or we're practicing rules of a game that doesn't exist, or we're practicing rules of a game that is limiting our scope in a way that it doesn't need to. So my hope in doing this, what are the 5 sort of key concepts? What is the 5-step process to have an author for life career, a long-term author career? My goal in doing this is to help all of us be able to feel the certainty that this career is within my grasp, even though some of us are seeing flagging sales, some of us are seeing releases that aren't working, some of us don't understand the rules of particular ecosystems of how to use an ads platform or how to use KU or Wide or whatever it is that we're confused or frustrated about, and we let the uncertainty rise up and it takes over. And my goal in talking about this, what I see on a large volume scale of coaching 6,000 plus individual people, some of the most successful people in this industry I coach. And that is important because when you can see the large scale patterns and you do know that it will be possible for us to do this and the patterns emerge and I can tell you what the patterns are, then you know you can trust that process. Because when we talk about just find your process or just trust the process, again, when you say the word just, that's a trigger that someone has an intact skill, like the ability to put all of those skills on top of each other and execute something that you are arresting on. You're not able to execute that skill. So my hope in doing this talk today is to give you 5 different pieces of this career that you can practice consistently that will allow you to be able to have the career for your life. Notice I did not say the career that you want, because that's unfortunately one of the rules. I wish it wasn't, but it is. So, sorry, I'm delivering things that I've already said. So what makes your decisions easy? When it's easy for you to make decisions about your author career, it's certainty. And what I see in a ton of authors right now, especially in the transition in the industry that we're in right now, which I'll talk about in a second, I see a ton of authors who are struggling with certainty because they are playing a game that is no longer being played. And so let's talk about that, because that is the first of the 5 pillars. So the end game, again, is I want to be an author for my whole life. And I don't just mean, hey, you can write books whenever you want to. I mean having a sustainable professional career as an author for your lifetime. The definition of some of those words are going to change for some of us because not everybody wants the same thing. But it is possible for the end game to be, I am an author for my lifetime. So here are the 5 key concepts for long-term success. I'm going to go through each one of them. And good news for those of you who were here this morning, we are on schedule for me to finish all the slides. Here's hoping. Okay, the first one. I'm going to apologize ahead of time for anybody who is struggling when I talk about the rules, but I need to get through this as quickly as I can. So, knowing the rules of the game that we're playing. Before the indie revolution, New York rules, which some of us are still playing by, and this is important, New York rules were, you only get one shot at this, so it had better be your best shot. If you debut and it tanks, you're never going to get another contract again. Those are the instinctual rules of New York publishing. And again, there's nothing wrong with New York publishing. Some of us do it. But in terms of if we want to have a lifelong author career, the way that venture capitalism created the rules of New York publishing is we want to expend as many chances as we can at hitting the big time, right? So that is what New York is about. It is about making money. So when you do that, you are able to expend a lot of people's individual careers, but you only give them one shot, because if they don't end up selling enough for you to pay the bills, then you're going to have to move on and find somebody else. We don't operate in that system anymore, and some of us are still operating in that mindset. We're placing so much weight on our first book, on our debut, on the way a sale went or didn't go, on the way a release went or didn't go, and the stakes are so high for us that we're creating an inability to move forward and find certainty. And I need us to know that unless you are in New York publishing, you don't need to worry about that fear of missing out on something or other, on a shot or having a bad book release. Again, remember the chess game. If the queen falls, you don't fail. You don't fall. That's not the end. You can keep going. Because what happened in the gold rush was we opened the industry to be able to publish anyone, which is excellent. That's why almost all of us are here, I would assume. But what happens when the gold rush reaches the saturation point is that we are all still operating under gold rush rules as well. So when the gold rush is happening, there's a whole bunch of money to be made, get in and make the money as quickly as possible, and it has this feeling of fear of missing out. So this fear of missing out that was prevalent under New York, because you only get one shot at this, the fear of missing out is, again, in gold rush rules, you only get one shot at this. That's how we feel instinctively. And again, remember the babies who are learning to talk and walk. We're watching what's happening around us, and we're assimilating those rules in how we make our decisions. And then we're allowing it to create anxiety in us that it doesn't need to create, because the gold rush only lasts for a certain period of time. Thankfully, though, good news, when the gold rush transitions into the stable, open, independent publishing industry, there's some hope there in that, unlike the gold rush in San Francisco in whatever year that was, don't remember history. Futuristics never remember history. But I'm living in the future. But unlike that, the resource is renewable. So the money doesn't go away in the same way that it did in the gold rush, but it also is now saturated. And that is why a lot of us are feeling overwhelmed. That's why a lot of us are struggling, is because it is a different feeling when the market is wide open and the water is blue than it is when the market is more saturated and the water is red. The good news is there is still food in the water. The water is just redder because there are more sharks in the water. But when it gets saturated, a lot of us start to feel like there's this sense of my dream is rushing away from me. There's a possibility I'm not going to be able to be an author for my lifetime. I've always dreamed of this, etc. And we forget that the rules change when the industry transitions. So when the industry transitions away from the gold rush, think of the gold rush as being sort of like the Wild West, right? Where it's like there's not a lot of law and order. Those of you who are publishing early, I did my first indie in 2012. So those of us who are publishing early remember that feeling of, I don't know what's going on here. None of us knows the rules, but we are sure here to figure it out. So the good news in coming in later in that is that once the industry gets more established, you now are operating in an industry that has more rules. The downside is it is also more saturated than it was, so you can't count on things operating the way they did in the gold rush. And the reason I have to talk about this mindset shift when it comes to author for life is when you start to feel anxiety about, I have to do this right now or I'm going to miss out. No, you don't. The market is going to be open for decades. Like the openness of the market is not going away. It doesn't mean that we can have whatever we want, but it never meant that. It never meant that. And I think that's an important thing, is that what has changed is now there's more established rules. Now we have to have more infrastructure. Now it's more necessary to do things like spend money to make money, things like that, et cetera. But what didn't change is our ability to publish, to get better at publishing, to get better at writing, and to learn. So none of that has changed. That still has been the same through both of those places, through both of those sets of rules. The upside of that is you can use that certainty to allay the fear that whatever frustration you're having right now in your author career means something about your ability to continue. It does mean something about your ability to continue at the level that you are at, in terms of if you are spending all of your resources, time, energy, money, and you are not making resources back, then you limit your capacity. But that's in a later rule. We'll talk about that in a second. But I need for us to understand that when the rules change, when the transition happens, most of us are going to feel really insecure and uncertain. Generally speaking, the median of the culture does not like change. And when change happens, we feel very insecure. And the good news is the change will be over. Things will normalize more and the rules will become more clear. We just don't know what it's going to look like yet. So this is why I said this morning, if you are not a person who can go to the future and look and find certainty and then come back to the present and say, let me act with certainty in the present, if the only thing that's happening when we're looking to the future is that we're getting scared, then we want to not look at the future because it's not helpful. It's not helping me to progress in my author career. Because I can tell you from an objective perspective, having coached all kinds of people in all kinds of careers, the great thing about the indie revolution is nobody gets to tell you that you can't publish anymore. No one does, not even the market. The market even doesn't get to tell you that, because the market doesn't know every book you're ever going to publish in the future. And every single time you publish a new book, there is a possibility that the market has shifted, because the market shifts all the time. So it's really important to start here, because the first foundational principle is you have to understand the rules you are playing in order to feel secure about being in this industry right now. Because those of us who are feeling the waves and are struggling with that insecurity, we don't know how to solve that problem for ourselves. And what I'm telling you is, this is how disruption works. It will normalize and it will feel better. We all have to hang in together and figure it out together. That's the fun part, right? Is that we're all in this together. And I don't mean we're all in this together in terms of like, we're all responsible for each other. I mean, we're all experiencing the same stuff together. So you're not alone in that. Okay, so know the rules is important. Play your game. If you don't know me and you haven't ever heard me talk before, my specialty is an individualized author success, which means every single person in this industry is successful in a completely unique and different way from each other. And so my specialty is in figuring out, how do we take everything that you have and get you to a place where you can be and feel successful, even if that means it's going to be a long game to get there. Because for some of us, it absolutely is. But what you need to know is that the only way to have long-term careers is to play your game. And I'll give you an example. If you are not a person who can write every single day, like it is not in your bones and body and DNA to be an everyday writer, and there are people out there like that, the more you try to write every single day, the more you are draining your capacity to write. Whereas people who write every single day and it fills them up, they get filled up by writing every day. They get drained when they stop writing every day. So if you're a person that you know that is you, but you feel guilty because other people are doing it differently, you need to understand how to talk to yourself in terms of this talk will help. You can get the recording and play this on repeat and remind yourself you don't have to do that. You can watch the Quitcast where I question the premise of you have to write every day, and you can remind yourself of that consistently, or whatever it is that you are believing the premise of that we need to question. But in order for us to be able to have a long-term career, we have got to stop playing the games that other people tell us we have to play, and we have to play the game that we are wired to play, because it will drain us too quickly to play somebody else's game, and there's a higher likelihood that we're going to fail at it. So if you are a write everyday person, you write every day. If you're not, you don't. And ne'er the twain shall meet. Both can exist freely and wonderfully. Both can have success. There's nothing predictive that says everybody who does one thing is going to be successful and everybody who doesn't isn't. There's literally no thing like that except your own process. However you do your own process, because it's about sustainability. So you need to know what makes you great, so your strengths, what you fear, and the reason that's important is fear makes a lot of unconscious decisions for us that we are not aware of. And if we don't know and deal with what we are afraid of, it's going to stop us from making progress at some point. So you have to know what you fear. There are a lot of psychological resources you can do on your own to deal with that. We really like Claire Taylor's Enneagram work. We use a lot of it because it deals a lot with your core fears and your core desires, which is the next one, what you want. Not all of us want the same thing out of our career. Some of us are only going to be happy if we're making $1 million. Caveat that, you won't be happy when you make $1 million, by the way. You won't be necessarily sad, although some of you will be. But humans are really bad at predicting what's going to make us happy. So that's another important piece. But you have to know what you personally want, what is driving you. And then you have to know what you can't do. And I was going to make a Johnny Depp joke, but it feels like a bad time to do that. But you have to know what a man can do and what a man can't do, right? I can't bring this boat into Tortuga on my own. You cannot do some things, and that is not a bad thing. It's okay if you can't. But you have to know what is not for you and what is. And this particular piece of play your game, there is a learning curve to learning the rules of how you function best in this industry, but it is worth the work. Because the people who are standing on the stages who are having the success, they have figured it out. They're just not attributing their success to that because that is how they did it, but they don't know that. But that is how successful people are successful. They align themselves to their best work. So this is the second step, and this is a very important step. You have to know what's for you and what isn't. Some of you know this instinctively. You don't need me to convince you to do this. But some of us, this is the main work that we need to do right now because there's a lot of uncertainty around us, and we need to know how to say yes and no. Okay, stop making brown-haired Daniel babies. So the third process, the thing that you need to be able to do is to question the premise. And the specific way that we question the premise is we have to have at least a time where when we get overwhelmed, we stop and we go and find someone else. This is the partner up ability skill, right? We find someone else to help us question the premise. There are a lot of people in this industry who are capable of doing this for us. A lot of them are on these stages. They can help us understand the industry in a lot more depth. They can help us get to the things that we need to question that we believe are true. The thing that I was saying about like writing every day, that's one of the question the premise moments that we have a lot around the Better Faster Academy, which is where I work. And at the BFA, when we do this, we call it QTP, right? But essentially what we're doing when we question the premise or when we QTP, planners will make you more productive, or everyone has to use SMART goals, or just do the work, or whatever it is that we're QTPing, right? What we're actually doing is we're breaking down why that works and who it works for. And then because we've completed the second step where I know myself, then I'm able to say, okay, if I look at why people are having success when they write every day, and it's because they are aligned best to keep momentum going, and they can't start again easily when they stop momentum, so they need to have that momentum. It helps them to continue. If I'm not like that, then I need to know to say no to that tactic. But sometimes you have to be able to question the premise. This is often where Becca comes in, the quit cast on YouTube. This is often where my talks come in at conference, is to try to help us stop making brown-haired Daniel babies, because we're feeling so much uncertainty in general about a lot of decisions we're making, and it is very tempting to latch on to someone else's certainty about what we should do in a general way, when sometimes you need this QTP'd for you. So you are not always the person who can do this for yourself. And again, in anything that I talk about, there's always an element of you need people in your community. So if you are here and you need people in your community, make sure that you take whatever time you need to prepare yourself to try to start making connections with someone. Even if it's a connection, this year we're going to be online and then we'll be friends again next year. Whatever it is for you, there is an element of we need a community of some kind in this industry. Because sometimes our inner voices are so loud, we can't help but be making brown-haired Daniel babies for ourselves. The really big place that I see this as important is often when we are not getting the outcome that we want. So it is really, really necessary for us to internalize the fact that if we are really playing a long game, a chess game in this author career, that there is no such thing as a bad thing that happens to us that we cannot come back from. Because we have the time to be able to figure it out. We are not up against a deadline of any of the industry's making. You may be up against a deadline of your own personal making, and then I would need to question the premise of, is that an accurate deadline? And for some of you it might be, and I'm not saying it can't be for anyone, but we do this a lot, especially those of us who are pressure prompted. A lot of us who have that I'm going to write to deadline sort of personality, we create structures of stress for ourselves to motivate ourselves to get work done. So we increase the stakes and we make the outcome feel much worse than it's going to be, so that we will do the work, so we'll work hard. And when we're doing this, we are essentially making brown-haired Daniel babies out of, you have to do this right now or you're gonna miss out on something. Good news is you've already missed out on it. And I mean that literally. The gold rush is done. Like, we are now in the transition into what I call the golden age of publishing, which I don't know if everybody will call it that. But I believe that having an open industry is the best thing for us as individual authors. It gives us the most agency. It allows us to have the most control. And I personally prefer that. So I call it the golden age. But it will feel unsettling as we go through that transition. Just know the transition will be done, and then the rules will become more visible, and it will be okay. So that transition is going to be unsettling for a little bit. Okay, so step 3, or the third pillar, is we have to have a way to question the premise or a place to question it. And again, you can get this from a lot of people in this industry, not just from me. You can get it everywhere, but we do a lot of this on the QuitCast, and we're going to do a lot of it in the upcoming year starting in January. The fourth pillar is you have to guard your energy. So those of you who play video games and you understand the concept of min-maxing, where you're getting the most out of the resources that you have and you're spending them in the right places, what happens when we are operating under either New York publishing rules or Gold Rush rules in our author game is we are min-maxing with the wrong rules in place. We're expending our resources very quickly because we feel very scared that if we don't do it right now, it's never going to happen. And that's a false fear that's created by Gold Rush rules or New York rules. But when the publishing industry is open and it's accessible to everyone, that means that you get to choose, and there is no more reason to hurry. In fact, what I think is going to happen in the golden age of publishing, and we'll talk about this in the next rule, but what I think is going to happen is that the rules are going to really change about what it takes to run a long-term career, and I think it's going to be really good news for a lot of us. So I'm excited about that. But here's what I mean by guard the energy. Some of us have to come into this job or into this career with the shoot for the stars mentality, because that's what we want, right? We want the $1 million career, we want the 6 figures, we want this. I want you to shoot for the stars, absolutely. When you come in, that's when we have the most energy and we launch. I want you to try as hard as you can, if this is what's for you, to be that thing that you want to be. And if you don't get it, if you do not become the next Colleen Hoover, I did not say that on purpose, by the way. If you do not become the next whoever that you are looking at as the person that you're shooting for, that doesn't mean the game is over. It doesn't mean that you're not checkmated, in other words. It's very important to understand what it means to play the long game. But step one for most of us is let's do the thing, let's try it, let's see what happens. Because while I do not believe that it is accessible for everyone to have that, I do think it's possible for anyone to have it. So there is no reason that anyone could tell you that it couldn't be you. So if you have a desire to do this, you need to do it. And then if it doesn't happen, that's when we worry about readjusting the scope. And we readjust the scope to say, okay, I spent all of this time and energy trying to do it the way that I thought it needed to happen, trying to make this big thing happen, and it didn't happen. Okay, great. Now let's look at the resources that I have. Let's look at how I can spend my energy the best. Let's readjust the scope to have a more sustainable career. Some of us are going to start for sustainability at the very beginning. So you're not going to do the shoot for the stars part. You're just going to start with the adjusted scope. What adjusted scope looks like is we are conscious of the in and out dollars in our business. We are conscious of the in and out energy in our personal life. We are conscious of our impact on other people and how sustainable is this? That's the question. And many of you who've burned out in the past know that that's the question you ask after burnout. How do I readjust? I recently went through a readjustment of scope, and because the majority of you in here have probably done some of my work before, there's a big change coming for the Better Faster Academy in 2024. And apart from our 3 flagship courses, we're gonna make everything in our entire academy free. And I'm gonna start writing more course content instead of doing more coaching. Right now, I'm currently doing somewhere around 140 to 160 hours of coaching a month, individual coaching. And I'm gonna reduce that way down to about 60 hours a month. And I wanna use all of the rest of those hours for writing curriculum, making more podcast episodes, writing more nonfiction books, because when I had to go through the adjust the scope, and I realized that in order for me to have a sustainable career, I had to do it in a way that I could replicate for the rest of my life. I can't personally replicate traveling 3 times a month, coaching 140 hours a month. I cannot replicate that forever and have the kind of life that I want to have. That's what readjust the scope looks like. You have to re-look at what is really important to you and what do you want to have in your long lifetime of doing this author career for your life. And then you make sustainable energy systems. So for myself, this means I had to put a limit on what I'm gonna allow myself to do. I'm gonna have to limit how much I will travel. I'm gonna have to limit how many coaching sessions I will take on, and I'm going to have to farm my coaching out to the coaches in my academy. Not have to, get to, because we have great coaches. Terry's here, by the way, if anybody hasn't seen him. Woo! But to me, that's exciting, because I instinctively know that the game I was playing before was not sustainable. I'm not going to be able to do that for my lifetime. And I want to do this for my lifetime. So that means that I have to adjust the scope and make my energy system sustainable. I have to be able to have a personal life. I have to be able to have more quiet, because I have intellection, and I am not giving myself enough intellection time. I have to be able to slow down my production and my travel. And that readjustment means that I'm going to have to give some things up that I really like. But it's because I want to do this forever that I'm doing that. And I think sometimes when we think about, oh, I don't want to give up the travel, I don't want to do this, I don't want to stop doing these things, it's like, right, but if you can't do it for forever, would you rather that it ends in 2 years, catastrophically potentially, or would you rather do it for the rest of your lifetime? So that's that fourth step. Guard your energy. It needs to be sustainable for us if we are going to do it for our lifetime, which means it has to be replicable, right? And then the last one, and I apologize for everyone that this is going to offend. Stop building infrastructure around books that aren't selling. Stop trying to make books sell that the market has said it doesn't want. Yeah. I love the intrepid business-owning group of people in this whole industry, in the indie publishing industry. We all want to run businesses because we want to be authors for our lifetime. But if we're going to do this sustainably, we need to know, again, New York publishing rules, Gold Rush rules, and then Golden Age of Publishing rules. We have to stop building infrastructure around books that aren't selling. And that means that we have to have the long game attitude. I am in this for my lifetime, and if my books aren't selling, that doesn't mean they will never sell. That's what it means to internalize the rules of the Golden Age of Publishing, is that there is no predictability that says you will never sell because you haven't sold. That is so important. Okay. If the books are selling, focus on the selling by all means. So those of you who have books that are selling, don't stop trying to make your books sell. That's not what I'm saying. But if the books aren't selling, don't build infrastructure around it. And that means don't spend money unless you absolutely have to. Because, again, we want to do this sustainably for our lifetime. And if the books aren't selling, how many of you have heard Melanie Harlow talk about cake and spaghetti? Okay. Her basic premise of her talk, #1 bestseller, is if you promise them cake and give them spaghetti, they will stop coming back to you. So what we want to do with the books is we want to make the best frickin' cake we can make. And I think that's good news for the majority of us who enjoy the creation of books, is to stop thinking about volume and start thinking about our readers and the market and the books that we love and how we create better books. Because in saturation, the rules change. That's why the Gold Rush and the Golden Age are different, right? The rules change. So I really do believe that we are going to have to focus more on building a product, and that means research and development is going to become part of Author for Life career, right? If you want to be an author for your lifetime, you need to see your whole pre-selling trajectory as R&D. And your R&D phase may last for forever, and it may last for 2 months. But you keep doing that, and that is how we get from phase 1 of that business model to phase 2, which is when you start selling, you start building infrastructure around the sales. And this last rule is maybe the most important and the most difficult. Because what we want to do is we want to just trust that every book is capable of selling. And I want you to listen to the market and move quickly and be agile. So I'm almost finished. Again, 5 key concepts. If you have questions, please do tag me in the Facebook group. We are not going to stop talking about this on the QuitCast, and I promise you over the course of time, I will answer any questions that you have. If you would like to come and find me, I'm going to be around after this, and tomorrow I'll be walking around the sale. So please do ask questions if you have them. I cannot wait to go on this journey with all of you, so buckle up, everybody. Here we go.